So I'm going to be covering off attribution and how I'm using Google Analytics and also Shopify to make better decisions with Facebook. So as you know, right now, the way we look at data on Facebook has changed. And, even going back a year and 2 years, Facebook was never 100% reliable. But right now, with the enforced changes from iOS 14, it's become less accurate for sure, but it's also impacting optimizations as well. And, recently I ran an account calibration test, which I've been meaning to do for a while, splitting Android versus iOS. And it's been quite interesting to see the data come through in the stats as well. But also just to show what I call the daisy chain of where that tracking is coming through and what's actually happening on Facebook, on Google, on Shopify. Now you can replace Shopify with any backend. It could be WooCommerce, it could be ClickFunnels. It doesn't really matter. I'll be using these as an example to show you how I go about really trying to unify the data, because this is the biggest problem here. Many of you will see this. You'll know something's working, but you don't really know what. You know that, for example, your backend data is showing you that you generated 10K and you've spent 5K on ads, but Ads Manager might show you've only made 5K. And how do you make those right decisions? They're the things that I want to cover off in this video. So now the first thing I want to cover off here is, if we are to understand attribution, one thing to understand is how Facebook and, for example, Google Analytics are actually connecting. How are they, I guess, how can we stitch that journey together? Now, you could replace Facebook with Google. You can replace it with Google Ads, any other ad platform. You can replace Google Analytics with any other analytics platform. The particular stack that I use is obviously for Facebook, I use Google Analytics. And then I might use one of three, so ClickFunnels, Shopify, and in some cases, WordPress as well, for a lot of the lead gen. Now, when I'm creating my ads, and this is where it starts with the attribution, when I'm creating my ads, in the view for the ads, you can add your tracking parameters. So I believe if I've got my screen here, you can see it down here. So when you scroll down, you've got this URL parameters option here. These are the URL parameters that I am using. So I'll just quickly explain what they are. So if I just click into here, so UTM source is telling Google Analytics that the source is coming from Facebook. The UTM medium is saying that this is a paid ad. Now, many people use different keywords for this. Some people just use the word ads. Some people use paid or paid social. There's lots of things you can use. Now, the reason I use CPC is because it's one of the standard ones that are built into Google Analytics to denote that this is a paid channel. So you don't have to use CPC, that's up to you. Again, like here, that's fairly basic. Do bear in mind, I believe that uppercase and lowercase are taken as separate. So if you call one ad uppercase F for Facebook, one lowercase, then that also has an impact as well. And then UTM campaign, what I think is really cool is what Facebook do is allow you to put placeholders in so that when your ads are run, things are dynamically replaced. And this actually allows you to literally copy and paste this same script into all of your ads. You don't have to worry about, going back 5-6 years, you had to type in all of the names for your campaigns and your ad sets, and would have Google scripts, sheets, and things like that. So what this does is, as long as you use that exact format with the 2 curly brackets, campaign.name, 2 curly brackets, then what that does is it passes the name of your Facebook campaign into this placeholder on Google Analytics called campaign. The UTM part is just an identifier for Google, but it's the campaign in your breakdowns that you'll see. Then you have your ad set name, and I put that into content, and then you can have your ad name, which I put into term. Now, this isn't a standard practice. This isn't what Google recommends or Facebook. This is how I use it. This is how my logic kind of makes sense of the data. I've been using this particular format for, I don't know, over a decade across many different channels. But for me, this makes sense. The campaign is the campaign. Now, content, bear in mind, Google Analytics was built around paid search. So content was related to the content that was being served. And, for us, technically that's the ad, but I called that the ad set name. And then the term was the keyword. Now for me, I put that as the ad name. So as a hierarchy, that for me makes the most sense. So it's just important to understand the construct of that. However, at the same time, you don't need to. If you just use that same string, and I will, when you're watching this recording, I'll have the copy and paste for you to just use that. Just use that and it will work. And I'll show you how that works. So once you've got that set up in your ads and you've got that published, every time a user clicks your ad, this gets added to it automatically. That then gets passed to Google Analytics. Now, when we go into analytics, we can see that data. Now, I've built a custom report, and I'll show you how to build that custom report. But what that actually does is I can create a view based on the data that's being passed from Facebook. So here, for example, if I just go to my edit screen, so in Google Analytics, once you've found your property, you go to customizations and custom report, you can create a new report. You'll hit a screen similar to this, but without all the metrics already chosen. But what I wanted to show you was this dimension drill down. So in my Google Analytics reports, I can drill it down by campaign, content, and keyword, which for Facebook is campaign, ad set, and ad. And what I do with this particular report is I say only include data where it's come from this particular source and medium pairing. And as you know, my pairing is Facebook and then CPC for source and medium. And that's what I'm doing to filter this report. So when I look at this data here, this is 100% only from Facebook ads. Therefore, when I look at campaign, and let's say I click down on that one, I can now see ad set, and I click down on that one, and now I can see my ad. Now, for you guys that have already been through the BPM method and seen some of my naming convention, and sometimes it might not make sense, and sometimes you might think, well, I don't really want to put all that info in. When you start to see the data come through like this, and I can see that this is my cold data, it's US country, I'm doing account calibration, the date I started it, it's on Android only. I can get all of this information. So if you imagine running multiple campaigns, and this is just a test website I'm putting this on, then it makes it far easier to understand what's happening. You can also use the same filtering to say, only show me cold or warm or hot or US or UK and all those kind of breakdowns as well. So in this campaign, I can see that I've got 4 ad sets that are currently active and sending traffic. I can also see that 2 have sent me revenue. Now, the thing about this is, as I was running this test, I was a bit apprehensive. Will Facebook show it? Will they not? And what will happen with Google? So I just want to see that. In fact, I haven't actually seen the data for this. I know some sales have come through since I've run the test, but I don't actually know how many. So if I go back to the top level and I look at this, so I've generated $159 through this testing, and the testing has only been set up for the sake of showing you this example here. And then if I go into my account and I look at campaign and I look at all the data here, let's have a look at our revenue. So let's scroll across. Where's my revenue number? So 159.85 has been reported by Facebook, 159.85 reported by Google Analytics. Now, because this website is a super simple e-commerce website, there's very little traffic going into it. There's no cross attribution. This is really important to understand, because I find that people will look at Facebook at times and say, oh, it's over reporting versus what Google Analytics is saying. And they'll say, well, Facebook is wrong, Facebook is greedy, Facebook's whatever. The fact of the matter is, when that number doesn't match up, there's attribution in play. So for example, if this number was a lot higher and Facebook was a lot lower, then I might be looking at this, because especially with this website right now, all I have running is Facebook. I've switched off the Google ads. There's no real emails running. So I know that anything that's happening is happening through Facebook. So because of that, when I look at this data, I know that there's no bottom of funnel, there's no mid funnel, there's nothing else that's going to complicate it. There's no other cold campaigns. So this is like a simple example of when there's no other kind of attribution at play, when there's no other marketing or ads at play, it's fairly simple to track. So Facebook has recorded the sales correctly. it's passed it off to Google. Now, most commonly, you'll also see where Facebook is showing a much higher number. So for example, Facebook might show, $500 here. And then, if I'm looking at this Facebook only report, it might show me $200. I still may have generated that number of sales. And here's the thing to really, really take away from this. Facebook works on its own model of last click, and Google Analytics works on its own model of last click. So when we look at that, what Facebook is looking at is when you are running your campaigns and you're running your ads and you generate a click from Facebook, whether it was the first click that was made in a campaign or an ad set or a last click, so top of funnel or bottom of funnel, in Facebook's eye, that last click that it generated the sale. So if it sent you 10 clicks and 5 people bought, then it generated 5 sales. Google Analytics, on the other hand, will not just look at Facebook, it'll also look at direct traffic. So someone that's typed in your URL, look at search traffic, it'll look at your Facebook ads traffic, Facebook organic, it'll look at email, any other inputs or kind of flows of traffic coming to your site. And then from that, it will decide where did the last click come from. So a common journey, and you'll know this if you've run any kind of volume in terms of any product, info products, e-commerce, it doesn't matter. A common journey is when you're pushing hard on Facebook and you're running Google ads as well, and you're running brand search, you'll find that your brand search is generating a lot of sales. Facebook will also say it's generating a lot of sales. And your backend will say, well, Google ads actually generate the sales. That's because as far as Google Analytics is concerned, it saw Google ads as the last click before a user bought. But if you were just searching, if you're just running ads on brand search terms, so brand search terms would be, if you're running ads for Lululemon, for example, you would bid on that keyword and say, if that keyword appears, show my ad. That's a brand search. But that brand search has to be generated by someone being aware of the brand. Now, commonly, when you're running Facebook and that's the majority of the traffic, and I'm talking about 70, 80, sometimes 90% of your top of funnel traffic, email will take credit, organic search will take credit, Google ads will take credit at the bottom of the funnel, and there'll be other things taking credit. And the big challenge, and this is now talking to agency owners in particular and those running ads for clients, is explaining to your client that, yes, I understand that Google ads shows that it generated 80% of the revenue, but it also came from the keywords that relate from your brand. And where did those searches come from? Someone had to know about the brand. Where did they find out? Well, we're running 80% of our top of funnel on Facebook. So actually Facebook got that as the kind of first pass. So if you've watched the video already on how I described attribution and a team of 11 soccer players or football players, that's the kind of daisy chain that often gets missed out in these conversations. So in this example I've shown you, there is no real daisy chain. It's literally Facebook ad and then purchase. There's no bottom of funnel. There's no Google ads. There's nothing to confuse it. So this is 100% matched right now. However, when you're looking at the data and you're trying to understand what the attribution was across different, campaigns within Facebook, let alone within other channels, Google Analytics can help you there as well. So there's a section within conversions which only works when you've got e-commerce set up. So in order to set up e-commerce, you go into admin of Google Analytics, and I would suggest you search this, and I'll share some links afterwards as well. But you set up e-commerce as part of your Google Analytics. That captures sales and conversions and things like that. It doesn't come by default. So just by installing Google Analytics, you don't get e-commerce. Once you do install e-commerce, then, so first of all, you get some really good overview data. But here's something cool. Now, when you go to product performance and when you've got it set up properly, you can actually see a match between product and marketing activity. So for me, for example, the 3 sales I've made, 2 of them were these and 1 of them was this product. Now, if I go to secondary dimension, I can say, hey, which campaign brought in the product sales? And I can look at that and say, oh, right, so these products are coming from these specific campaigns. Or I might say, okay, I understand they're all from the same campaign. Which ad set were they coming from? And as you know, I use the content placeholder for that. So I can see now specifically So bear in mind, I'm doing an account calibration test right now, which as a reminder is I'm just testing different pixels to see what's generating traffic. Actually, you can see that the event initiate checkout has generated me 2 purchases. So one of the questions that's come up quite often following iOS 14 is when I'm doing my graduation testing and I can't see the conversion data in Facebook, what do I do? Well, actually, if you've set up your UTM tracking properly, you don't just look at Facebook, you also look at Google Analytics. So in this case, and let's take the scenario where maybe Facebook shows I didn't generate any sales, I can see clearly here that this particular ad set generated me 2 sales. This particular ad set generated me 1 sale. And you can see all the clicks down here as well. So although there were other products viewed with, view content, initiate checkout, etc., these particular ad sets generate sales. Then I can go down to term. So the search term is what I use as a placeholder for the ad name, and I can see which, let's go as keyword actually, not term. I can see which ad name specifically has generated the sales. So you can go right down to your individual ad to see what's generating your traffic and your conversions and your revenues. So for example, I know that in this case now, it's an account calibration test. So as you know, I'm using the same ad in every ad set. But for example, maybe, this is design 2, this is copy 1, this is video 4. Then I can match that back and I can start making better optimization decisions by looking beyond just Facebook. I'm not saying don't use Facebook. Use Facebook because it will give you some data, but at the same time, this will give you extended data beyond just what you see in Facebook as well. So, most of these breakdowns, you can see it by the secondary dimension. So as long as you've got your tracking set up, then that's that. So that's e-commerce, and then that's a whole other area of insight. But what I wanted to show you was multi-channel funnels and top conversion paths. This is the really cool part of having your tracking set up properly. What top conversion paths does is it answers the question of what is your daisy chain. So as a reminder, when I talk about daisy chain, it's what did the first click, what generated the second click, the third click, and then what converted. So I want to know exactly what that path is and what the most popular paths are. So here, for example, this is Google Analytics' default grouping. It says that 3 purchases that came through. Let me just confirm I've got that set up. So of the 3 purchases that came through, they came through what Google Analytics is calling paid search, because I put it as CPC, and then direct. So someone's done a search and then come back directly to the site. If I do the source medium path, then I can see my Facebook CPC, and then they've come through direct. But what I want to do is look at it by campaign. So we can see here that we've got our iOS campaign has generated 2 sales, and the Android campaign has generated 1 sale. But in both cases, they did not click the ad and convert straight away. They came back at a later date. Now, this is really important because if I look at this and say, did someone convert just by seeing the ad? No, they didn't, because they came back through a second means, which because the campaign is unavailable, it means it's a channel that was not tagged up with UTM campaign. And in this case, it's someone just either typing in the URL or maybe just coming back to their browser later on and purchasing as well. You can also do that by your ad set as well. So here I can see that the popular path here was people coming through this campaign. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is by default, Google will show you on this report only interactions where there were 2 or more touch points. Now, as you can see, I know that there was an initiate checkout path that had converted. I need to change that to say all, so I can see that as well. Because what's happened here is, let me just change conversions up here to e-commerce, because I only want e-commerce. Because within Google Analytics, you can set up so many different goals, and I just want to see the e-commerce right now. So the conversion paths that I can see for these 2 here, let me just check. Conversion path length is all. Okay, that's fine. So this one, someone did come through my ad set for initiate checkout and ATC, and they converted on the same journey. There was no second click. So for these people, essentially, they're your impulse buyers. They're the ones that came in, saw the product, and purchased. If I want, then I can also do my keyword, and I can see the ad as well. And the powerful thing about this is if you're running a full funnel system, so cold, warm, hot, and you're running multiple ad sets and campaigns, you can see exactly which ads people are interacting with. Now, this is something that I've been pushing Facebook for years and years. Like, we need this in Ads Manager. I want to know if someone clicks into my cold campaign, is it contributing to hot? Because you'll know this, if you're running retargeting on Facebook, most of your sales will often come through your hot or warm campaigns. But it's difficult then to figure out, right, what do I do with my cold campaigns? I know something's working, but I don't know how to kind of match it back. That's the daisy chain again. So once you have this properly operational, you'll be able to see and say, right, which campaigns and ad sets are leading into my daisy chain, and which particular ads are people following into my daisy chain. And that helps you to make better decisions. Now, this is a test store. I ran a number of tests last November-ish, and I have a lot more data to share from that. So this is a store that I turn on and off mostly during Q4 to do lots of testing. So if I go back here and go into Q4, and now if I do this report, then let's just go back to conversions. That's fine. And let's go to my double, so 2 or more. So as long as there's 2 or more interactions, then it will show. Now, here's an example. So here's a top of funnel ad that I was running. So it was to announce that there was a new product. And then someone came through my retargeting, which was a particular barrier to say, where are they made and delivery times. So by making sure that you're labeling your campaigns properly and making sure that you've got descriptors that make sense to you, you can literally read what's happening in the data. So again, if I go back to my campaign path here, then I can see which campaigns are contributing with each other. Now, the most popular campaign up here did not have tagging. So I'd have to have a look at exactly why that was and where, where that traffic was coming from. But if I look down here, for example, so you've got lots of different interactions. So you've got unavailable, which makes it difficult. There may have been a case where some of the ads didn't have tracking, or I think in this case, I think we were running Google Analytics, but we didn't have the tracking set up properly. But you can see the path. So for example, we ran a Black Friday promotion for this one in our hot. The user clicked, and this was 3 conversions that came through this daisy chain. The user clicked, but they then repurchased again through another hot campaign. So at this moment in time, we're running 2 hot campaigns together. This one, for example, they'd interact with 2 other channels before converting in our phase 3 cost cap manual bid campaign. So now I can understand far more data than I could with just Facebook alone, because this kind of data at the moment doesn't exist in Facebook. Facebook were looking at attribution and setting this up. I was on the attribution panel, but iOS 14 threw that out. So this is how I would be analyzing that data so that I can understand what's happening through essentially my daisy chain. Because if I can understand that, I can make better decisions. I can make a decision on, for example, let's say on my bottom of funnel, and I want to look at so when I run my retargeting, for example, I'm always I'm always building my objections. So with this particular store, indecision was based on kind of custom testimonials, jewelry design not to my liking. It was based on showing how user or past customers enjoyed the product, some UGC as well. Where are they made and delivery times? That's come up as well. That was about showing that this is a US product. It's shipped, made, sent from the US. So all those kind of barriers then come up. So in some of these cases, if the data doesn't show in Facebook, I can come here and I can see what's actually working from my data. Now, there are lots more that you can see here, probably a bit more out of scope of this particular video, but in a similar way, it all starts from getting your data set up. So this one here is actually really quite useful once you've got a lot of data. Assisted conversions looks at your different channels that are bringing in traffic, how much revenue was brought in, how much revenue but also sales were brought in directly, and how much was assisted. So I'm going to click here just to explain. It gives you a value from 0 to, I think it might be able to, it goes above 1 as well. So what happens is, if this value is 0, that means that this number is 149 and this number is 0. That means that this channel generated 149 conversions, but it assisted 0. That means that it's at the end of the funnel or the top of the funnel, but it was just working on its own. In this particular case, it generated 53 assisted conversions. So what this tells you is somewhere down the daisy chain, this particular source and medium contributed to sales. So although Google Analytics attributed 11.5K for this particular source and medium, it's also attributing another 4K as assisted revenue. So I really, really encourage you to keep an eye on this, because again, whether you're running your own ads or you're running it for clients, these are the conversations that you need to be having around, whether it's Google or Facebook or wherever you're running your ads, what is the actual value of what I'm doing? The value could be a lot higher. So if I look at this, if I didn't account for that 4K, and this is kind of where eROAS comes in as well, because when we look at just Facebook or just Google Analytics, we may lose out on that assisted revenue as well. So that's really important to kind of keep an eye on that. If you want, you can also do that by campaign. So for example, let's have a look at this one here. So this one is my standard retargeting campaign. It generated 28 sales as a last click conversion, but it also assisted 25, which means someone's clicked that ad, but then purchased through another channel. And I think it was probably abandoned cart or something else. That means the value of that is not just 2.5K, it's also an extra 2K on top. So when you're doing your analysis of where should I put my money and things like that, it makes a huge difference. Now, when you're indexing above 1, it means you're assisting more than you're getting direct purchases. So this is an exact score of 1, which means here I've had 5 purchases directly from this campaign and 5 were assisted. So this is top of funnel. It's a min ROAS campaign that I was running, 1 to 3% lookalikes, etc. So I know here that, although I can't remember what the spend was, but I've generated $260 here, but 330 was also contributed from this campaign, which means it started here, but then ultimately converted somewhere else as well. So again, I just want to reiterate, cheers, Lars. So I just want to reiterate, the very, very first step you have to absolutely take is make sure you've set this tagging up, because it opens up a whole world of opportunities. So the first thing is, you've seen the insights of what you can do in Google Analytics, e-commerce and path setup. If you don't have e-commerce, at the very least, you can set up custom reports. Very easy to do, new custom report, and it will give you a screen similar to, if I go into edit here, a screen very similar to this. You just drop in the metrics that you want. So metrics groups, I've got sales, funnel, and session data. That you can have as many as you want or as few as you want. You can have different tabs. That's all on the side. But the main thing is having your data so that you can set these drill downs up, and that's all good. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is, and this is something which has gone a bit below the surface with Shopify in particular, is the other benefit is, once you've got that data set up, is you can also see in Shopify. So let me just refresh this to make sure it's got the full data. So those 3 sales that I've just generated are also in Shopify. This is a rare occurrence where Shopify, Google Analytics, and Facebook all match up. But the other cool thing is, when you look at the reports and you go down to marketing and you go to sales attributed to marketing, which is here, what Shopify will do is to show you the UTM campaign data here as well. So when you're analyzing, this is the third layer that you look at. So you've got Facebook, you've got Google Analytics, you've also got Shopify. Now I'm going to edit these columns because I don't necessarily want marketing type. And that, what I do want is my campaign name, my content, and my term. I don't know if that's going to squeeze it too much. Now here, for example, I can see the exact data that I can see in Google Analytics. I can see it in Shopify. Why is this good? Because it allows you to have a third comparison. And it also, especially, if you're running your own store, it's fine. But if you're running with clients, it gives them another area that they can also look at as well. And, they can export the data. They can look at, you can actually look at some other things like, margin and profitability and things like that, because assuming you've got your product set up properly, it's all good saying I generated $160, but you can go right down to the campaign, ad set, and ad level and analyze your profitability for each of the campaigns that are running and the products that have been purchased. So, you've seen in the analytics how we can look at e-commerce and products. We can look here and see how profitable we actually are as well. So these are the three main areas of analysis that I'm using right now, but in particular for Shopify. If you don't have Shopify and you're using ClickFunnels or anything like that, then at the very least, make sure you've got Google Analytics and your Facebook tracking set up properly so you can make sense of that data and you can create and build those reports as well. So hopefully that gives you good insight as to how I'm dealing with this. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been testing third-party attribution tools. Now, this is not a replacement for those third parties because they can give you so much more. So for example, with Google Analytics right now, I can't feed in my Stripe data, my PayPal data, my active campaign data, my Klaviyo. I mean, Klaviyo you can because you're going to tag up your campaigns. But thinking about kind of importing lots of data in, that's really what differentiates the third-party tools. Now, I wanted to build something that you can use without paying, because for the majority of you guys, as you're either kind of growing your business or you're growing your agency and things like that, that kind of discussion of bringing a third-party tool in might be a bit more difficult because you can pay $300, $500, up to $1,000 a month for these attribution tools. Is there a time and place for them? Absolutely. If you're doing 7 figures, you absolutely need these attribution tools because they help you to tweak and analyze and make better decisions with the data you've got. However, if you're below 7 figures, I personally would be using this. And for my e-com store, I don't have any third-party tools installed. For my info product business, my training business, BPM, Zassar, I do have a third-party tool because we're doing numbers that require a lot more depth and I'm using far more channels. This, for example, this e-commerce test store, we do Google shopping ads, we do Facebook ads, we're experimenting with Pinterest ads, Snapchat, TikTok ads. It's an experimental store. So I'm not really worried about the nth degree of what decisions I'm making. This analysis is good enough for me. So, I'm hoping for you guys, you're able to make that kind of decision. If you want to go for a third-party tool, and you're only doing, let's say, 5 figures, 6 figures, it's not a problem. If you've got the money for it, it's not a problem at all. But I also want to show you that there is a different way of looking at this as well. Cool. I'm going to take your questions now.